All right, we are live. Welcome to another episode of Live with Marcel and Kilani. And today we have a very special guest. Kilani, would you like to do the introductions?
For sure. Welcome back to the show, everyone. As always, let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from and let us know if you're watching live or catching the replay. Also, right off the bat, if you have any questions for Mike, if you caught our post giving a little bit of background on what today's webinar is going to be about, feel free to put your questions in the comments. This is going to be hopefully a very interactive session. Mike has a really great formula that he's going to share with us. So if you can, let us know in the comments what you're thinking, and we'll work off of you through this call as well. So just to introduce Mike, he's been in the human resources arena for over 30 years, leading all areas of HR with an emphasis on change management, organizational development, learning and development, and professional coaching. He is recognized for developing one-of-a-kind solutions that lead to individual and organizational performance. His formal background is in engineering, where he modeled and analyzed the accuracy of nuclear-tipped ballistic missile designs. In our webinar today, we're going to share a formula that helps solve a big problem. When one of our team members isn't performing well or struggling a little bit at work, the big question is, what do we do? How do we help them? And Mike has a one-of-a-kind solution to help us through that. So welcome to the show, Mike.
Hi, Kilani. How are you? Thank you very much. Hi, Marcel.
Hi, Mike. How are you doing?
Great.
Yeah.
And
Thanks for coming on.
Sure. Just one comment. It's an expansion of an existing diagnostic. It is a one of a kind too, but it is an expansion, as you will see. So.
For sure. Awesome. Thank you for the correction. We're excited to share the formula. Could you tell us and our audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Above and beyond what you had mentioned, Kilani, I have headed up human resources in 2 different companies. The role that I'm playing now is back in the learning and development field, which is what I really enjoy doing. And I think you covered the rest of it pretty well. So thank you.
Yeah. And you know, just to everybody's the audience, Mike is also a fellow Newfield ontological coach, which is an area that Kilani and I love to dabble in. So that's kind of how we ended up kind of meeting as a mutual connection in this space, and so it's always fun to speak with a peer, and somebody who applies ontology as well in their work. So wonderful to have you today.
Great. And we'll jump right into the formula, because I know that's what all of our audience is waiting to hear. So we'll put that up on the screen in a second. And Mike, could you walk us through what the formula is, what it looks like, what it's made up of?
Sure. First of all, regarding the formula, this is something that I have used for probably a good 25 years on and off now. And as a head of HR and as a business partner, very often I'd have people coming up to me and saying, this person doesn't get it. I don't know what to do. I'm frustrated. Fix it, or whatever. And as a leader in several organizations running departments, same things. We run into situations, all of us, anyone who's got direct reports, you will run into situations sometimes on a regular basis where the performance that you're getting from one of your teammates is just not what you're up to your expectations. And so what I found over time as a manager, even as an L&D person, when someone says I need training, I'm supposed to tell them what to do. It's a great way to have a conversation to figure out what the contributions are to, let's call it a gap in performance. And so this performance equation is fairly simple. It says the performance that you're actually getting relative to what your expectations are is some kind of a function. We don't know whether they're multiplying, adding, dividing. It doesn't matter. There are 3 different contributions to that. One of them is competence, another one is motivation, and the third one is the environment. And so just to talk a little bit about each one of these 3 in this formula. And by the way, many of you have probably seen performance is a function of competence and motivation. So this kind of expands out to the environment area, and then also in the performance area. So typically if somebody's not performing to your expectations, we look at that P there, which stands for the actual performance relative to the expectations. And the very first thing when I'm not getting the results that I want to get, or I'm coaching somebody else because they're not getting the results they expect, say from a direct report, is to find out how clear is it to the person what the performance expectations are, and are they in alignment with what the manager expects them to be. And I'd say probably 17 times out of 20, this is one of the contributions. As managers, and you are all managers too, or if you're not a manager, this is going to be no surprise to you, but we probably don't do a good enough job teaching managers how to play their role. And one of the big shortfalls typically is managers not being clear about expectations that they have with another person. They get kind of lazy and sloppy and expect them to read their mind. So almost always this performance delta here, there's a contribution because there is an alignment. The person thinks they're doing great and the manager thinks their performance is substandard. So that's got to be straightened out first and foremost. And then when we look at the situation for the person as well, one of the questions that we want to ask is, can they even do it? So this is your competence question. Does the person have the knowledge and even the practice and the skills, the experience to get, whatever needs to be fixed here or taken care of? And one of the signs here is if you think about the person's been able to do this well in the past. Let's say that was the situation, and all of a sudden they're not doing it so well. That may not be a competence issue. It could be something else that's going on with the person, unless something changed about how to do the job. So that second area is motivation. And this answers the question, does the person want to do it? Or do they think it's even valuable to do it? So this is really more about, is the person lacking initiative? They're not enthusiastic about this. To what extent do they want a challenge? And what about their mindset? What are the stories in their head that they have about what it is they're supposed to be doing? They're pretty unhelpful and negative stories. So while competence is typically handled through some training and practice, the motivation, as Marcel was talking about earlier, very often you switch into the coaching mode. And so here you're really trying to figure out what's going on for the person. Is there something that's changed recently? A lot of times the person just doesn't see the value in it whatsoever. And if they're not seeing the value, they're not particularly motivated to do it. They feel like it's a waste of time. And this last area, the E for the environment, I have on here, does management encourage them to do it? And another way that I cynically like to put it at times is, will they let you do what they want you to do? Right. Very often your manager or others expect you to do certain things. And then when you look at the manager's behavior, it really undermines that. A person may be sending emails with questions and the manager's not responding, or it could be the reverse of micromanaging that really takes the wind out of people's sails. Sometimes that's what's going on. So you really need to also look at what's happening in the environment. I think a good example of this is when COVID hit and office closures started occurring all over the world and people suddenly had to work from home. That's a big shift in the environment, and that's why we saw it in the beginning, at least, it hitting some of the performance. So that's kind of a high level overview of that. And Kilani, what comments, thoughts do you have on this, or anyone else? If you can just put in the chat, see what kind of questions are coming up with this. Then we'll take on some examples.
Yeah, for sure.
What needs clarification here?
Yeah, and if I also kind of may kind of add to that as well is, one thing I really like about this formula, right, is because Kilani and I, we have a lot of conversations, and I'm sure you do too, Mike. With regards to managers, and managers are always like, how do I motivate my people? and it's a really interesting. I'm just going to get rid of this image for a second. Here we go. So, that's always a big question, right? How do I motivate my people? And I think what this image really shows really nicely is that very often people don't need motivating, right? It's more about what's making them demotivated, right? So what in the system is preventing them from feeling motivated? And it's either a misalignment with regards to kind of understanding what the expectations are and what kind of work they want to do, but for a large part it's the environment too, right? It's not necessarily because everybody at work generally, right, they're competent people. You're not going to hire incompetent people, and so generally speaking, it's not necessarily a matter of competence that's preventing a person from feeling motivated, but in all likelihood, it's either going to be a misalignment of the performance expectations, or it's going to be something in the environment, and this is what I see a lot in organizations is leadership might say one thing, right, with regards to the values that they have, and we put our people first, and we don't want you overworking, and we value work-life balance, and we do all of these kind of things. And then you have the manager who's like sending emails at 1:00 in the morning, kind of expecting a reply by 7 a.m. And so there's this mixed match of messaging, which then creates an environment of that is way less stable, right, with regards, it's way less coherent with what the organizational values might be, and all of these kind of things, because it's the behaviors of the collective, not necessarily just the manager, but just and that's the environment, right, is the behaviors of the collective that creates that that sense of safety, and that sense of kind of well-being, and belonging, and and all of those kind of things. And for a large part, that's where people have a tendency to not look, right? That tends to be a blind spot that I see a lot, is that where, there's very, very rarely do I hear a question from a leader kind of saying, hey, what do we need to do about our environment that's going to help our people, be more excited and motivated and engaged, and and all of those kind of things. So I love that formula. I think it's a great way of breaking it down for ourselves, right? Kind of like, in terms of being able to say, hey, if I think my people aren't kind of, performing in a way that I would love to do, where might I be looking, right, with regards to how I can help them, and so that becomes a very nice kind of way of diagnosing that and seeing that. So thanks for sharing that. That's fantastic. Yeah.
There's another aspect to that, Marcel. I think that it's a really good point on that. Both you and Kilani are graduates of Newfield coaching, and maybe I'll even leave it to you to talk about this. If, let's say, and this happens a lot, probably you hear this in coaching, and I hear it a lot when I do this, where I'm talking with the manager, and the manager will say, I don't think this person can make it, or whatever. I had them. We all, part of the human condition is we have stories about ourselves, about others, about what we're here to do, about our environment. It's just part of the human condition, creating these stories. And if you run across a manager that is writing someone off, or just thinking they're not going to make it, how's that going to play out just from your training?
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, then we get into a whole story around biases, get around, framing kind of our realities, language, right? Body, emotion, and language, which is of course a big ontological, kind of piece. So what kind of body are you wearing, when you believe that, somebody isn't going to be able to cut it, right? How do you show up every day, in the office towards that person? What kind of environment are you then creating based on that, kind of energy that you're projecting if you don't believe in your people, right? And then that, of course, creates this vicious cycle you know, of proving yourself right, you know, because that person is not going to feel comfortable in that environment. So they're not going to perform in the way that they're supposed to. And then you prove yourself right by saying, see, I told you this person was incompetent.
Exactly.
I'm right.
it happens in autopilot mode. You know, it's one of these things where, your managers, should be asking, what's it like to work for me?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's kind of scary.
Like? Yeah, exactly. Would I like to work for me? Yeah, that's right. Would I go to work every single day, feeling really excited, and something I do with my leaders too is just to break the bias, is to always say, when we have a certain opinion about anything really, right, is do we spend our time trying to prove ourselves right, or do we spend our time trying to prove ourselves wrong? And if we spend all of our time trying to prove ourselves right, chances are we're operating within that bias, right? And that's what feeds into that environment. But if you have a leader who's willing to prove themselves wrong and say, or if they have an opinion about an employee and say, okay, let's prove me wrong. Let's find something in this person that I'm not able to see, right? Then that already creates a different environment. Yeah. So
I mean, think about it. Go ahead, Kilani. You go ahead, and then I'll go.
Oh, that's okay. I was just gonna say, speaking of stories, I think that the formula is a great way to take the bias and the story out of it. Oftentimes, we hear people say, "So and so isn't performing well," and that's all the story that's available to them, right? Because from their perspective, all they see is they're not hitting the mark, right? And I think what's so great about this formula is it gives us a deeper dive into 3 huge components. And I'm sure there are many subcomponents to each of those that play a role in why someone isn't performing. So it gives you a cheat sheet almost into going around the story.
Yeah. And I can even see that expanding into self-diagnosis. Right, like with regards to I'm an employee, for example, because every manager also reports to somebody else, right? And I'm not performing, right? Because how often don't we hear that, where people actually feel incompetent, in their work, and they can use that to diagnose themselves as well and say, okay, am I actually hitting the mark? Am I hitting my KPIs? Am I doing, kind of the job I'm supposed to be doing from a performance expectation standpoint? Yes, I am. Great. How about my competence level? Like, it's like, where am I on this competency level? Where can I improve, and what could I potentially do, in that competency level? Motivation. Where am I in motivation? And what am I doing to contribute to the environment? Right. So there can be a great self-diagnosing potential here as well, where people can potentially lift themselves out of that funk of simply thinking to themselves, I'm not enough, or I'm not performing well enough.
Yeah, and just adding one other minor thing on that, if you say, I've got all my KPIs, maybe it's time to check with your manager and make sure, are these still the most important ones, given how the environment continually changes? Because it may have changed, and it may not have been communicated to you. One of the things I think about is that all of us, whether you have direct reports or not, but even more importantly, if you do have direct reports, our job is to bring out the best in those around us, period. And so one of the things that I've done, and I've been doing this for years, and to me, it's just fantastic to do it, is when I enter a new team or am heading up a new team, I do a real simple team exercise where I have everybody prior to the gathering put together a top 5 to 10 list of what are those things that put the wind in my sails, and then a top 10 list of, top 5 to 10 list of what takes the wind out of my sails. And then I add another question on there, which is, what else is important to know about me? And then the last one is, what is the support that's the most important for me to receive from my manager? All right. And I gather them all in a group, including whoever my manager is. And we take one person at a time, and we just walk through them and we discuss them. I save them, and I have them like right on my desk. And so what I just focus on is, making sure that I have behaviors every day that puts wind in their sails, And I avoid those things that take the wind out of their sails. Or sometimes, you have to have difficult conversations, but knowing what their sort of sensitive points are can help navigate through that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something that, that I talk a lot with my leaders about and it's one of the, kind of major leadership paradoxes, right? Is the ability of a leader to be both supportive and challenging at the same time.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's such a difficult balance for a lot of people. Like a lot of people, they think that being challenging is about challenging people on their performance without maybe necessarily having a clear communication of what the expectations really are, and kind of what degree of expectations and all of those kind of things. And so a way that I like to frame this is with regards to support and balance is that you support people with the benefit of the business, but you challenge people with the benefit of them, right? So in a way, it's you don't challenge people based on their performance outcomes. You challenge people based on kind of like their potential, right? It's kind of being that cheerleader and challenging them in a way, just like what a coach would do, right? Kind of say, hey, can you, is there room for growth here? Is there something that you can do simply because you can do it, right? Or simply because it's going to make you feel more satisfied. It's going to blow wind in your sails, right? So we almost want to challenge people in a way that gets them excited about every single day of coming to work, and everybody likes to feel like they are the best version of themselves, right? And actually people enjoy being challenged to be the best version of themselves, as long as there's an environment that supports that, right? And so that's where that kind of support piece comes in, is if you then are able to create the resources, and you create the opportunity, and you're being able to kind of like set people up for success that way, then you create this beautiful balance of growth, right? Where they can operate. And very often, that's where managers, in my opinion, they flip that up the other way around. They think that they have to support the people, in a way that supports their people, and challenge people in the way that supports the business. And when we do that, that actually creates disengagement, because people don't feel like the conversations are really there to help them, right? It's really around the conversations going to just strictly help the business. And it takes the human element out of that equation. And that's, that becomes that creates an environment, that can be quite sterile, right? And lack of empathy and all of those kind of things. So, and I find that really an interesting conversation. It's something that, a number of, kind of my leaders have been, kind of playing with and working on. And it's really interesting. And a lot of that plays into this formula, right? With regards to, the performance, competence, motivation, and environment. Yeah. So it's amazing how simple framing of these things can make such a big difference, right? With regards to kind of how we like to operate, in our work and stuff like that. So and that's something I work with.
Yeah, and I think what we're really starting to see here is how this formula doesn't just help the person who's struggling, but it helps the leaders and the managers assess themselves and help them show up as a better leader as well. So it just kind of creates this whole unification of everyone. And what I think would be really cool is if maybe we can put the formula back on the screen and kind of run through an example situation of how a leader would use this formula to help someone who's struggling. And if we have anyone on live who's willing to share, if you maybe want to give us an example without mentioning names, and of course keeping things confidential, but very vaguely a situation where this could have come in handy, and maybe we can walk through how this could work. And if we don't get anything right away, Mike, if maybe you want to share a sample situation or a made up situation and walk through that.
Sure. Yeah, it'd be great if somebody here in the audience has a situation to come up and just talk your way through this. And Marcel, to your point, Marcel, it takes two to tango here. And to Kilani, what you had said, it's a back and forth between both. Nobody's isolated by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure.
So go ahead.
Yeah. Let's see if the audience types in it. Sometimes it takes a little while too for
Right.
comments
Yeah.
to come
Yeah.
through. Yeah. So just because of the
Well,
broadcast and things like that.
yeah. And if you just want to if you've got an idea in your head, just raise your hand or say, I'll go, and you can just talk it through.
Yeah.
And while you're typing that in, that bottom half of that slide contains some questions that you might ask very often yourself on this when you see a performance gap from your expectations to how the other person is performing.
Yeah. You know what is really interesting with this formula, and I actually just recently had a senior leader who was recently hired into a tech firm, and he has no tech background, and but he's an amazing people leader, and so he was actually brought into the company because the CEO felt that that there are too many kind of like tech oriented people, and so they want to kind of just shake the tree a little bit, broaden that out, and bring other conversations into kind of the environment, right? And what's really interesting is the reason why I got hired as his coach is he was struggling a lot with imposter syndrome because he felt that he was he didn't have the competence as a leader because he doesn't have that same technical background as a lot of his colleagues. And so when his colleagues would be going into that kind of technical jargon, he'd be lost. And that really, kind of played at his self-confidence, as where, if he were in his, previous industry, he would have been, of course, wonderfully competent, right? If you deal with a leader like that, for example, who is maybe struggling with a little bit of imposter syndrome, in that sense, because they don't feel competent, how would you approach that, Mike?
Yeah, so let's just follow through on this. I guess the first question that I'd like to know is that person reports to the CEO. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. He's a C-suite. Yeah.
Yeah, so to me, one of the first conversations that needs to occur is an assessment from the CEO. Like, how's this person doing? For that, what kind of support have you been giving the person? Now you can get at some of the E things.
Yeah,
the environmental
CEO. Yeah, CEO actually loves having him around, and so he actually gets a lot of positive reinforcement. And
from
he
the
asks
CEO,
because he's
right?
and something that the CEO likes is the fact that he actually doesn't know, because he's literally naturally curious, right? And so he asks great questions, and that's exactly why the CEO wants them, to a point where recently the CEO had to travel on personal business and actually asked him to take the helm, rather than kind of the technical counterparts that have been there for decades, right? And so there's definitely a lot of that positive reinforcement that's coming from but just he himself just has this is kind of stuck on that I'm incompetent because I don't know the
Right.
that technical space.
Yeah. So I think, Marcel, what I would be curious, if I wanted to sort of zero in on one thing and see if it's rich territory for exploration. This individual came in there, is working with these technical leaders. To what extent do the technical leaders, how do they view this person? Do they view him as the special golden child from the CEO, or what could be going on there too?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there are definitely, I mean, there's definitely, at his peer level, right? He is accepted, but I don't think the environment is as warm as the environment that's trying to be created by the CEO, right? So there are many
Right.
instances where when he is only with his peers, the CEO is not present, that he's reminded of not having that technical background,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. So then in the motivation area, it'd be a conversation, I think, with this person about, you were hired here to add certain value. Let's explore those areas. In a way, that person was there to do what his or her peers were not able to do for themselves.
Yeah.
That's the gap that the CEO is expecting to be filled. So, on the
Yeah.
motivation front, it's like, what are those skills or competence this person already has that he's expected to use?
Yeah.
Because he may be focusing on trying to prove himself technically or whatever, and that's not his role. So I'd want
Yeah,
to
exactly.
challenge that too. Did any of that come
Yeah.
out?
Well, yeah, but actually, what we ended up doing was quite interesting. You say that is we ended up reframing competences. So because his competence isn't in the technicals, he's not hired to be competent in the technical space. He's been hired to be competent in the people space, and so for him it was about, even though he's in an environment where he's constantly, that people are trying to remind him that he's incompetent in a technical space. He has to remind himself that he's been, put in an environment because he's competent as a people leader.
Right.
And so, constantly holding on to that reaffirmation, right? Of that's why he's there. And being able to just kind of feel that satisfaction of knowing that that's his role, is to be a people leader. And so when he then fully embraced, kind of like, but it's okay that I'm incompetent in the technical space, because I'm supposed to be very competent in the people space. That's my job here, and that's what I'm really going to focus on and kind of step into. And so the moment he fully embodied being that leader, it changed everything for him. Yeah, and that allowed him to just feel a lot more relaxed and comfortable, even though he was in an environment that that may be judging him sometimes, right? Kind of on his lack of technical expertise.
Yeah.
And but it's interesting how how sometimes just self-assessments, self-judgments can really kind of challenge our kind of feeling of competence and incompetence, right? Because we start telling ourselves these stories of it's like, I'm not, I can't do the job. Yeah. And then how
stories.
That's right. And how detrimental those stories then become to our own performance, right? Because if he had allowed himself to continue going down that spiral, it would definitely have affected his performance. Where at some point in time, he would have had a conversation with the CEO, right? Where the CEO was going to say, "Hey, you're not meeting expectations," and and it is really, really interesting. And I love how that all comes together. I've never used this formula before, Mike, but I promise you, I am definitely going to use this in my coaching. It's a great framework to be able to break things down with regards to kind of like where number one, a person is at, but also number two is where is the relationship at, with regards to kind of the leaders and the rest of the people. Yeah. So
the other thing, Marcel, on this is, what is this person's key performance indicators? Are they technical key indicators, or are they shaped to be people related, extent of buy-in, or, other types of KPIs that would get that, it would point that person in the right direction.
That's right.
So
yeah,
that's
exactly.
another area of discussion, right?
Yeah, exactly. And
it's
amazing.
Almost like, I was gonna say, it's amazing how often these things get substantially resolved just through the P. Just relooking at what you expect them to do, making sure it's clear what they're there to do, You know, you can even set milestones or whatever. But I just I've had more times as a HR business partner where once we got that part squared away, they didn't need me anymore.
Yeah.
You know, it got fixed.
Yeah, exactly. And it's and it kind of reminds me of you know, the framework around you know, requests, promises, and expectations, right? You know, is that in a way a KPI is nothing more than a request, right? And that the organization or the manager has, and we know that the clearer our request, the clearer our ask is, right? The more the clearer the promise is going to be, and the more likelihood that those expectations are going to be met. And the less clear the ask is, the request is, the less clear the promise is going to be, and hence therefore the lower the chance is going to be that expectations are going to be met, right? You know, and so it all boils down to that conversation, right? Of like how are we framing that request of those KPIs? How clear are they, and how clear is the promise, you know, that the receiver of that request, you know, is coming back with, in terms of saying, all right, this is what I can do, and this is how I'm going to meet expectations, and simply have that agreement and be able to move forward, right? You know, and so that fits beautifully into that performance conversation. Yeah. So
yeah, and you know, another area too, when you're talking about KPIs, I'm not a fan of them unless you're maybe expanding their definition. But to me, if you're going to set a performance goal, performance result, performance behavior, whatever it is, there's sort of certain key elements. One is the person has to be clear about what's the situation now. And, you know, what, is it an opportunity or a challenge? But it needs to be changed. It could be because of an opportunity or a threat or whatever. But where are we at now? And then the second thing in the conversation is, where do we want to be? And I like to use the words conditions of satisfaction. Give me a list of the conditions that if they're met, you will be satisfied that this was done how you want. That's a lot easier than just say, give me goal. Right?
That's
conditions, it helps make it easier. And then there also ought to be sort of boundaries. You know, like, you know, this is what we're talking about. This is not what we're talking about. In other words, you know, you could think about, this is only to be applied for this piece, not the whole thing, or for this group and not the whole group. You know, doing all of that. So it's like, you know, to me, the top things are where we're at now, where you want to be, and what are any sort of boundaries, no-fly zones, however you want to look at that. And then if the person is not real good at, you know, not real confident and they're still learning, I'll send them back and say, think about the steps that you would take. All right. And then come meet me. You know, when can we meet again? 2 days, 3 days, whatever. And then now it's their idea on how to get there. So they'll feel more empowered. And what a micromanager does is he skips those first 3 parts and just says, I'll give you these 2 steps now. Come back to me when you need more. But I don't even say come back to me. You have to keep coming back and coming back. But if you can sort of frame it out properly, it needs a lot. The person is able to make more decisions on their own. Following that path to get there. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think a lot of that, again, comes back to language, right? You know, is having a clear understanding that, and I love how, you know, how you frame, you know, instead of saying expectations, say having conditions of satisfaction. And what's really interesting when we hear language like the word should, have to, all of these kind of things, right? That's basically expectation language, right? And so when a manager says, listen, this person should be doing that, and then, you know, a great question is to ask, well, what are your conditions of satisfaction? You know, and how have you laid them out? You know, and they're like, well, it's like, wait, what? I have to lay that out? Well, then you get back to that reading your mind type thing, right? You know, and that happens so often, isn't it? It's like we hear that language. This person.
Whenever I hear would, should, could, you know, any of those, it's like, okay, if you say they should know better, all right, have you had that conversation with them as an expectation? Nope.
That's right.
All right.
Exactly. So where is the benchmark?
Do you expect them to read your mind? What's going on here?
I know.
And of course, you
where's
do
that
it in
tangible?
you do that in a very tactful way, right? I mean, you're just
Yeah.
asking questions, but
Yeah.
curious questions, because you can't.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to assume positive intent in all these types of conversations,
Absolutely.
and just sort of explode. This formula is great for helping you search around till you find rich territory for exploration, and usually it's in almost always in more than one area. There sometimes it's in
Absolutely.
all four of those areas.
Yeah, it's a holistic process, isn't it? To because
Yeah.
I can, where would you put resilience in that formula?
Yeah. So tell me a little more about that. As I
Well,
just worked,
it's yeah, I mean, because I mean, there's of course mental well-being. There's which is a big topic these days, and of course the ability to bounce back from setbacks and all of that kind of stuff. Like that might be a question I can expect maybe some managers asking. So where would resilience fall into that?
Yeah.
equation?
Well, I actually do a workshop on resilience, and there like different facets to that. One of them is the language that's being used, and I like to distinguish something that is a fact that can be proven right or wrong versus something that's a story the person invented in their head, and then they assumed it was true, and he should know better.
Yeah.
That's a story you invented in your head. You can't prove it right or wrong, really. Something like that. So that's one element of it. Another one's around moods and emotions. When somebody's in any kind of a mood, you have a story about it, and then you're predisposed towards certain actions. So it's like, pay attention to your moods. And a good classic example of that is anger. The language around anger is, you did me wrong. All right. And I am going to punish either, and usually it's three different areas. Either I'm going to punish you, or I'm going to punish myself, or I'm going to punish the next person I run across, whatever. And we've all experienced all of those. So being aware of moods and emotions and your predispositions, that's another one. Another one around resilience, I am a total fan of, and thank God it's not seen as woo-woo anymore, but just some type of centering exercises. I do almost every day. I do breathing exercises. I only do it for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And, it's amazing. I mean, biologically, you'll notice over a few months, your heart rate's going down. You're not reacting as strongly when you get triggered. All right. You recover a lot faster. There's no substitute for that meditation.
Yeah.
It's
absolutely.
Huge. And then the third area, or the fourth area I get into, is this whole idea of the flow of conversation, the push, pull, move away. If somebody's really pushing and they want to be heard, let them be heard.
Yeah.
Keep pulling. When they're pushing, you pull. Eventually, you'll get to a point where you'll say, I think what I heard you say was blank, blank, and blank.
Yeah.
Is there anything else? And then when they say nope, then you say, may I share my perspective? In other words, can I push now?
Yeah.
You don't have to go first. In fact, it's better if you don't go first usually, because usually you make an ass out of yourself, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because you made some assumptions that were.
That's right. And making an ass of you and me, right? Yeah. We and we use that, of course, in the 5 energies, right? We talk about
for resilience,
that determined, the determined and inviting, right? You're inviting them to to just come with whatever it is, and then you allow that flow of energy to happen in a very Tai Chi kind of way, right? So I wholeheartedly buy into everything that you're saying, my friend. Yeah, it's totally the same stuff that we use. Absolutely. So I think that's pretty much, we're at the top of the episode, right, Kilani?
Yep. Yeah, we're right towards the end. We had a good 45-minute conversation there, and so much value.
I know we could probably talk for hours.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's so much on this topic alone, and then considering our new field backgrounds, 3 of us too, there's a lot that we could cover. And Mike and I explored that too while we were coming up with topics for.
We did, yeah.
But
there's a lot of very much commonality, and the work that you're doing, I'm a real fan of, and right in alignment with it.
Yeah, I mean it's all born from that whole kind of that same kind of new field esque space.
Yeah, and beyond that,
and beyond, that's right. It's just expanded, right? Yeah, and you're doing the same, and we're doing the same. Yeah, it's wonderful. That's amazing how that foundation of ontology can really kind of just spark so much amazing work. Yeah. So Kilani, do you have any closing questions for Mike?
Just one last question. I mean, first of all, thank you for sharing all of your wisdom and this amazing tool as well for people to use. Just last question, where can people connect with you?
Sure. Probably the easiest way is on LinkedIn.
Okay.
And if you just type in Mike Grabarek, my name, I think in the entire world, there are like 5 of us. And I think 2 of them are just the same, but you'll see the same picture of me that was in on the advertisement. So I'm the one it says in the greater Hartford area.
I'll also list it in the comments here so people can connect with you easier.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's pop that in there so then people can. And also, if people want a copy of the image, is it okay for us to share it?
Send a PowerPoint because it's got the speaker notes in there too.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right.
So that'd be the way. Yeah. That's free to share with. If we can get more people having better conversations around performance, I'm so happy about that.
Yeah, for sure. Let me see what we can do with regards to sharing that, or maybe I can, because it's always good if we can throw it straight into the comments. Because I have the. Let me see if I can have the Dropbox link. Maybe I can do that.
Oh yeah, that's a good way. Yeah, just send a Dropbox link on that.
Let me just check.
Or if the other option is just shoot me a message on LinkedIn too. I'll send you the materials too for anyone who's not able to get them. But are you able to do this after and send it to everybody, or you have to?
Yeah, I'm actually going to, because it's sometimes it's good to actually throw it in the live broadcast.
Yeah,
because then
so
it ends up
that.
on. I'm actually just going to. Here's the link. PowerPoint.
Yeah, it is best to have the whole document, so then you're not recreating anything from scratch. And
there we go, and then this way people can just download it straight away, and then they can use it in whatever way they want. And please, when you use it, give Mike some credit. So it's always good to play it forward. I know I'm using it. And I'll make sure that give you enough credit with doing that too. So so once again, Mike, thank you so much for joining us today and all your wisdom. And I hope to get you on the show again one time, in the future. You have so much to share, so tons and tons of topics that we can talk about.
Would love to. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah. All right. Well, in that case, we're going to sign off. Kilani, you have any final comments? No,
that's all from me as well. Thank you, everyone, for watching.
Great. Fantastic. Well, thank you, everybody, for watching. And remember, you can watch this. The broadcast will be rebroadcast. You can also watch it on YouTube. You can watch it on LinkedIn. You can watch it on Facebook. You can watch it pretty much everywhere. And it stays around for a while. So and feel free to still make comments, even though it might be, the broadcast might be over, because then we can always follow up with you and get you in touch with Mike, and so on and so on. All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and see you next time. See you. Bye. Okay. Bye.